Do I need it closer?
I think that's gonna be good. Right there
That's gonna
is
be good.
perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, you get people very relaxed. You make them lean back.
I hope so. I hope that they get the good chair. They get the comfy chair. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Long Form Conversations, the podcast where we talk about long form improv. As always, I'm your host, David, and today we have a very special guest. This person is so talented, but he only needs one title, one catch-all salutatory. So please welcome comedian Mike McLendon.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going,
Hi,
Mike?
everybody. Good. How are you, David?
Good. Thanks so much for meeting me on the AM.
You're welcome. You're welcome. AM's, it's early.
It
My
is
days
early.
start early.
Yeah. You're a morning, an early bird or early
No,
riser?
my son is, my wife and I are both night owls. And then we gave birth to an early riser. So he was up at 5 today. Just like, well, if he's up, we're up.
That must be a recessive gene, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
How old's your son?
3.5.
3.5. Okay.
3.5, yeah.
So he still gets to call the shots in that household.
Yeah. He's the boss. We work for him. Yeah.
What time are
Yeah.
you getting up usually now?
Like 5. Like, never before 7 or never after 7.
Is it usually like when the sun rises?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When the birds sing.
Right now is probably a tough time of the year for you because it's officially summer. Today's the first day.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
sun's probably rising early.
Sun's
setting late.
rising early. It's hot. We're on the second floor. It's
Mhm.
an LA apartment, you know.
He's probably not doing school. I don't really know when preschool starts.
Preschool can kind of start like at any time.
Yeah.
But he has not done school yet. He's like my 9 to 5. So I used to coach improv like almost from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday.
Mhm.
And now I improvise parenthood from like 9:30 to 6:30 Monday through Friday.
How's that been? I don't know if this is going to turn to a parenthood.
Yeah, that's okay.
podcast,
That's
but,
okay. I'm happy to give parenting advice to to all the young improvisers in
Yeah.
LA who listen to this.
Well, some improvisers aren't very young anymore. Some improvisers are maybe starting
That's
to,
true.
to
That's
jump
true.
into that.
Aging up. Yeah.
How big of a shift was that for you?
It was the parenthood shift was big, but it happened to coincide with COVID.
Mhm.
So like we found out that we were having a baby in February 2020.
Oh, wow.
And then in March, the world shut down. So
Mhm.
like I didn't have to experience this thing that I've seen parents experience, which is just like, oh, like I can't do nights anymore. I can't do nearly the amount of shows or practice groups because I have other responsibilities. I didn't have any responsibilities other than
Yeah.
my family for like 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
You know, as the world turned back on and things opened again, everything had changed anyways because
Yeah.
of the nature of schools and theaters being shut for 2 years. Like my team didn't come back because my team wasn't invited back, you know, so I didn't have to run into these like FOMO moments.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's interesting. I feel like it's hard to say because I really have no other frame of reference, but it seems like that's a great time to have a major life change, right? Like for a lot of people, like the pandemic is like, oh, ever since then I started doing X, or I started doing Y. Like,
Yeah.
so for you to like have embarked on this, like, right when so many other things are changing, it's like a nice little reset.
I mean, the pandemic was awful across the board,
Yeah.
but uniquely for me and my situation, like we just nested for,
Mhm.
you know, a year, which is a good thing to do when you have a pregnant person in the house and you can
Yeah.
take care of them. And she was able to work from home and I was able to work from home as well and take care of her. And so we were able to, I guess, kind of thrive in that situation as much as you can in that
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
And speaking of which, I always wanted to talk to you about this. So one thing I really liked about working with you is that you are like you have a lot of teaching experience and you like to
Yeah.
bring a lot of that to you. I wanted to ask you like specifically about the transition to doing Zoom classes. You mentioned that you're working
Sure.
from home now. So like teaching and coaching over like just like so many other people had to do. We had to switch to a lot of like, what would you call this? Like video conferencing
Yeah.
classes. How did you like feel about it? How did you adjust to it?
It was certainly an adjustment, I think, for everybody. It was amazing how that technology was sitting there
Mhm.
and how like that everybody just adapted to it. and like learned how to do it. I think in the beginning with Zoom, it was really fun playing with the functionality of it, because being like, oh, we can change the background, like let's do. So when I was coaching, then I would be like, all right, let's do 6 weeks of courtroom improv, because we could all have the same courtroom background drop, and we would just do like improvised court scenes or like night court the show, so that was fun. Doing that, and then like gradually, like anything, the newness of that wore off, and kind of the challenges of internet improv started to poke their head or be more apparent, because you can do a lot with it, but there's so much that you can't do with it, including maybe one of the most important things, which is just like making eye contact with someone. That's impossible, because you've got you can't look at the screen to make eye contact. You have to look at the camera, and then you're looking at a camera. You're not looking at another face.
I forgot if it was like a VR thing or if it was like a webcam thing, but have you heard there was like some company trying to like automatically like it was like augmented reality. It would change your pupils so that although you're looking at the screen down here, like how you're always looking down, it would automatically make it so that it looks like you're looking at the camera.
Yeah, that would trip me out.
Yeah, so that way, if I'm looking at you on the screen, it would CGI my eyes to look at the camera, and then vice versa for you. So it would simulate the eye contact. I don't think it ever went anywhere. I think it might be a little bit too creepy.
Yeah,
but like something like that is a big hurdle to overcome, especially because there's so much. I guess you could say like so many like soft skills or so many like non-verbal like communication cues that happen on stage between improvisers.
I mean, like one of the most a very influential teacher for me was a guy named Dave Rosowski, who came out of Second City, Chicago.
Name drop.
Name drop. Raz. And he like early, like one of the things I remember most from him is the concept of checking in with your scene partner at the top of a scene, just like making eye contact in organic improv, even starting from that eye contact. Like, what are you giving me? Beyond the suggestion, what am I getting from you? You're the most important person on stage. And that's so hard to do with Zoom, because like it's just clunky getting two people on sometimes. Like one person comes on, a scene partner comes on, another person at the same time, then they're like fading away, and like I guess that's the equivalent of like somebody grabbing a chair and somebody like telling them to put it back, at the top of a scene. Like tops of scenes can be a little squishy just in the mechanics of them, but Zoom tops of scenes can be really tough because it is like, it's very challenging to start that way.
Yeah. And like the little internet lag, like.
Internet lag, all that. But what it has also done in a really cool way is it has exposed the world to other improv ideas, philosophies, and principles, right? So where you don't have to go do a festival in Portland to work with those teachers, or you don't have to go do a DCM every year to take classes with the UCB teachers that were there. You can be exposed to anywhere literally in the world and take those classes. So I think that's really cool in like spreading the wealth of improv concepts that are out there, and not just like maybe it's Chicago style, which I feel like is the majority of the country is very like Chicago style, and then the coasts are to me a little more like UCB.
Yeah, like for me, even like as a student, as like someone learning about improv, I really liked that. I liked the ability to like. I'm much more of a auditory person. Like I listen to audiobooks as opposed to reading them. I did really well with like lectures more so than like group activities as a student. So the great thing for me, at least, my learning style is because we're on Zoom, you can kind of just keep your camera off, and it's almost like just listening to people and getting more audio cues, and also learning to communicate further. Because if they can't really get my body language, they have to get it from the intonation of my words or my word choice.
Yeah, that's great. And I like listening is so important also, that was another, I'll drop another Rosowskiism, which is the concept of everything matters, the tone of voice, the way you're saying it, how it's being said, listening not just to the words, but to like the meaning and the tone underneath the words. And so Zoom certainly helps with that. But it's like you said, body language, just you don't get to see the bottom half of somebody on Zoom. Is like, that's challenging. And again, eye contact is just, you can't do zip zap zop on Zoom, which is the most basic improv game warm up. It is the very first warm up you learn, and you just can't do it because so much of it is like making eye contact with somebody. You can modify it, but you can't do that one.
We may get to talk about like teaching more, but just while we're on this topic, talking about warm-ups, I just also wanted to ask you, having worked with you, you're really big on warming up, and we've done a lot of like different variations on Zip Zap Zop. I wanted to ask you just really quickly about like the importance of warming up.
Oh yeah.
Like, what like, I don't know if you got that from another
No. I
Chicago
mean,
improviser.
I've got it from a number of people. Like probably the thing that stuck to me, because teachers all tell you kind of the same thing, just
Right.
in their own ways.
Yeah.
And it was Drew DeFonso Marks who just equated it to like vocal warm up. Like if you're a singer, like you run scales or you sing, like I did a musical a few years ago, and like we would do vocal warm ups before we step out there and sing for the first time. If you're a basketball player, like you go and you do free throw drills, or you like do layup lines, like even NBA professionals, Steph Curry shows up very early and shoots 1,000 3-pointers or whatever his routine is. Bands, everything, do sound checks. Like it is a way to like tune your instrument beforehand. And so I'm big on warm-ups or checking in, because I think you're setting yourself up for potential failure if you're not.
Yeah.
And like when I work with people who are stubbornly like in a green room, like I'm not going to stand in a circle and do this childish stuff. It's like, what if 7 of your teammates want to?
Yeah.
And even just by going like, I don't want to do that, you're already creating like a division, a potential animosity for other people to be like, well, I don't want to either. Like if one person on the team is like, it would really help me if we stood in a circle and closed our eyes and counted to 10, like we would do that,
Yeah. I think a big part of that too is, like getting, yes, like you get your instrument warmed up, but you're also getting like your chemistry warmed up in a way.
Sure. Yeah. That's so important.
So if it's just like, like we're in the green room, we're just drinking our sodas or our alcoholic beverages.
Yeah.
And it's like one guy's like, oh, I don't want to help you. That's already like, oh, well, then on stage, I'm not going to feel like I trust you. I'm not going to feel good about it. Versus if it's like, hey, yeah, let's count to 10. And everyone, you hear all 7 people say, yeah, let's do it. That's going to get that person feeling much better on stage to make a move or take a risk.
Yeah. And like improv warm-ups are inherently uncool. There's not a cool one to do. Right. And as you get, the longer you spend with a team or a group of people that you trust, like some of that might fade away. Like my house team, Outside Dog, we did warm-ups forever. And then I'd say in like our last year or two as a team, the warm-up just became our conversation in the green room, doing bits together, but we would do silly warm-ups. And I remember one time we were at the San Francisco Comedy Fest, and we were warming up in the green room, and we were opening, here's some name drops. We were opening for Nick Kroll and Friends. But it was a big show. So we were in the kind of like taking the piss out of doing warm-ups, kind of like being silly with them, but doing very like zip, zap, zoppy warm-ups. And as we were doing them, John Hamm walked into the room, and like the speed at which we all transformed out of warm-ups, it's like, oh hey, yeah, like was so funny and indicative of just like, that's so we funny. Know they're uncool.
Zip zap John Hamm.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to get, it's like getting caught with your pants down or something.
Well, you know what? I can't speak for John Hamm, but I bet you when he walked in, he thought, these guys are so cool. I wish I had some buddies to do Zip Zap Dot with.
He's a comedy fan. Like so that's the pressure we put on ourselves.
And as far as warm-ups go, like I don't think there are any cool ones, but conversation, shooting the shit, that's pretty damn cool. You guys
it's a pretty,
give yourself a pat.
To give you
all right, great. Well, you've dropped plenty of names already. I want to hear more names, because we're gonna jump into our first segment.
Oh, great. Segment.
So this is going to be Improvster Syndrome.
Do you do music drops for these?
I do,
Okay, great.
So there'll be a music drop, and it's over.
Okay, great.
So this is a segment where I want to hear about your improv journey, going through from the beginning, maybe even before you discovered improv, how you found your way to it, and then just talking about some of the different struggles you had. I know you've had a long career. I know it's been centuries,
decades, and a great one.
But I definitely want to hear about some of the harder times. I know there's been plenty of successes, but just something that students can kind of relate to in terms of like, oh wow, like the great Mike McLendon also struggled with, third beats. Great.
Okay. Well, I think I started improvising, and the more I learn this, and the more I'm like raising a kid is like, you improvise every day, right? Like that's, and you're making things up every day. But I think from a very early age, I just remember doing make believe in my room, even by myself, like play, where I'm like acting out. I'm making up movies in my own version of the Goonies, or I'm making up my own version of whatever like kid movie I saw recently in my room by myself with imaginary friends, that kind of thing. And then I was around the time I was in high school, I became a summer camp counselor, which is, if you know me, that very much fits the bill of who I am, right? Camp counselor, RA, improv coach, dad. It's like all the same track of kind of mentoring and working with people.
Yeah, if we were doing, I forget that word we do where we say like a couple things in a row, we stop it so we have to label it. This is finally coming together. I was like, all the things about Mike. It's like, and then the camp counselor, got it.
Yeah. That fits. That's on the resume.
Now.
Yeah. But at camp, like you're constantly doing not sketch comedy, but you're doing skits. You're doing like campfire skits, and like those are mostly just like beats, right? Like we're gonna do this beat and this beat and this beat. And so you're like making up, stories and scenes and stuff for kids there. So I was always doing improv, but not really knowing what the name of it was. And then an ex-girlfriend kind of told me, like, recommended that I do comedy sports, and I went and did comedy sports first and did short form.
What age were you at?
I was I guess in college I also I sat in with a couple improv, like if there was an improv show on campus, I would be the first to have my hand up to go up on stage and do the bits. But actually doing short form, I was probably 22 in Houston, doing short form comedy there, loving it immediately, excelling at it immediately. That's not so much to toot my own horn, but just like I've always been quick with puns and wordplay, which is a big part of the short form stuff. And then I was a theater kid, and in some ways in high school, I was a theater kid and an athlete. I wasn't a great athlete, but I loved the team aspect of it. And so comedy sports, as soon as I was had done Comedy Sports 101, I was ready to move somewhere. And I thought about going to Chicago and taking Second City classes there, and I went online and they were sold out for the summer.
Oh, wow. So already just 1 year to Comedy Sports, you're like,
yeah, I had at that point, college was done and I was doing Teach for America. So I was teaching fourth grade in Houston, Texas. And I was coming towards the end of my contract there. And the decision was like, oh, I can stay here in Houston and try to continue to be a teacher.
I see. So you weren't, it wasn't like your hometown, Houston.
No, Houston wasn't. I was at University of Texas in Austin. And all I wanted to do, I was a film major, and all I wanted to do was move to LA. And I had a college sweetheart who was a doctor who was going to Houston for med school. And I followed her to Houston, and I was pretty miserable because I wasn't pursuing acting and writing and comedy, which is what I had majored in and what my passion was. And so when that relationship ended, it was that's around the time I did Comedy Sports to kind of fill that gap. And then that kind of gave me the permission, or like the get out of here, go try stuff. So I wanted to go to Chicago and take Second City summer classes there, but they were sold out. I knew they had a location in LA, and I signed up and what I essentially did is that summer, the summer of 06, I went to LA for 2 weeks and did Second City intensives here. And then I went to New York for a month and PA'd on a movie and watched shows in New York to kind of get a sense of which coast do I want to go to.
Gotcha. So like sampling a little bit of both.
Sampling a little bit of both. And honestly, like almost day one, taking my first long form class here in LA with Dave Rosowski. That first day of classes, I met James Mastriani in a drop-in class. Who was like, "Oh, you're funny, man. You should move out here." And I was like, "I will."
Great Mastriani.
You will be my best friend. And now kind of like kicked off my, James is my comedy spouse. Like we've known each other 20 years. Coming up together, and it was serendipitous that we met in a drop-in class.
Yeah, that's great. If this was a movie, that'd be like your meet cute.
Yeah, that was our meet cute. Yeah.
But I want to ask, so when you first came out and you did that intensive, so you had mostly done Comedy Sports, short form. Yeah. What was like that first? I mean, did they teach any long form in Houston?
No.
So what was that like first couple of classes like?
Well, this is a Second City 101 intensive. So it's the building block. It is short form building blocks.
Yeah.
It was stuff I had done before, but even like slightly elevated things, but we're not doing heralds or montages by any means in that class. We're just doing short form games that might have like a little more scenicness to them.
So you were kind of already ahead of the curve in terms of
I was ahead of the curve in terms of the short formness.
Yeah, like
but
that
then
guy couldn't think of good puns.
yeah, I'm really punny.
Yeah.
And confident as a performer, like I liked being the center of attention. That's always been a part of my journey, as well as being the class clown. And I moved around a lot. I was a military brat. So like I learned if I was funny and could take the attention, then the attention, like I wouldn't be made fun of if I was the first person being like, look what a goofball I am. Like that was
I was gonna call him a goofball.
But yeah, I can't.
All right,
he's cool. So aware of what a goofball he is. Yeah.
All right. So after the first couple of intensives, and I forget, I it's been a while.
Well, out here then, there was Second City, there was Acme, there was Groundlings, there was UCB, and there was iOS. There was like big you right?
Yeah.
But Second City was the first one that I had arrived at. And so that's where I started interning there immediately to pay for classes, because you have to intern out here somewhere if you want to go through programs. And I just burned through the classes as fast as I could, doing the classes there, interning, spending as much time as I could there. And honestly, what made me accelerate was I attended every drop-in that school offered. And that's where I met James and several other people. And that's where I was really, the drop-in is where I was exposed to like long form improv. It dropped in like, like jump off the boat and swim, sink or swim. Because it wasn't short form. It was get a word, do an organic scene, get notes. And I loved that. I loved it.
Yeah. So I know for like that school, they had like a 6-class conservatory. I think their improv program was like 1 or 2 different courses. Were these all multi-week, or were these a lot of drop-ins?
No, they were multi-week. I was going to class every Sunday, and then I was doing drop-ins 3 days a week.
Gotcha.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And that was supplementing it. And that was what was like getting me good pretty fast, because I was doing it as much as I could. I was doing jams on Saturday. I was going to Second City every night that I could, because I just moved here. I didn't have a job. I mean, I had a series of internships.
Yeah.
I had survival gigs at that time and a little bit of money left over from teaching. So I just threw myself into improv for the first like 3 or 4 months.
Let me just ask about this part really quick too, because I think a lot of people experience this whenever they move to a new city, whenever they try to jump into improv. Yeah. It is kind of like taking as many drop-ins as possible. I don't know if drop-ins are as frequent now as they may have been back then, but I want to ask about like we talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast. When you do a drop-in, you kind of are mixed around a bunch of strangers, and you get the sense of like, oh, those guys are friends, or this person's doing it for a while. So to try to get like the lay of the land, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. I want to hear about like your approach and your philosophy around like jumping into these drop-ins.
So that first drop-in that I went to, I stood in the parking lot for a while being like, do I want to go pay $20 to do this? Because these people are going to be so much better than me. I did have the Imposter Syndrome, but I didn't know who these people were, and now looking back on it and just being like, I was intimidated by the equivalent of like a 301 student.
Yeah.
Which isn't to knock 301 students. It's just like, they're not too far ahead of me. And frankly, at that point, some of them weren't ahead of me just because like the way people are. I was very, like I said, confident and excited to do it. And I took notes pretty well. And I listened really well. That was a secret at the very beginning, was just to like call things out when I heard them early, make a big deal of it, not let things go by me. And kind of hone in on the relationship or what was funny, and making choices right, and agreeing right away at the top. And I'm glad I eventually paid that $20 and went in. And then over the period of time, like realized like, I was a freshman in this world of seniors, right? But like I was performing at the same level as them, and they, for the most part, they made me feel welcome and excluded. And the ones that didn't, the ones that kind of held that seniority, like they don't do this anymore. Their egos made them get left behind.
That's funny that you say that. Yeah, because I remember experiencing that. Like, someone's like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you, David. What class you at?" "Oh, I'm taking 201 right now." I'm like, "Oh, I'm in 401." It's so funny.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, those are the ones that like don't stick around anymore. How much can 8 weeks really set you ahead of somebody?
Yeah.
When at the end of the day, we're all on like this long multi-year journey together.
And you don't know where people like have come from either. Like people may have come from New York and did, may have been on a UCB Herald team and then moved out here, and you meet them in a class and you're like, oh, I'm just finishing 401 with Billy Merritt. And they're like, oh, cool. I was on a Herald team. I'm trying to make a Herald team out here.
Yeah. For sure.
But so I did Second City for like a year, and the scene out here in LA at that time, this is like around the 2008, 2009, there was no indie scene.
Mhm.
There was no, if I wanted to do a show, we would rent the stage at Second City for the night and pay $300 or whatever it was.
And people did that
Yeah, yeah. You
as
would,
as a class or like as a
no,
practice
as an
group
indie
or
team, as a practice group,
yeah.
you would rent a stage and then you would, pay for the stage for an hour. 300 is maybe a little pricey, but it was at least $100.
But inflation,
And
that's
you would not get
$300.
the ticket sales.
Yeah. Wait, what?
No, you're not making money off of that. Like, you
What a
just
great business model for them.
yeah, it was. But there just weren't opportunities.
Yes,
There wasn't
yeah,
a
yeah.
clubhouse. There wasn't the clubhouse changed the game out here. And certain indie teams did too, like Casey Faye and some of those folks who started like Crash Bar changed the scene. But to quickly go through, because I'm still in like the first couple years. Second City at that time had a contract with Norwegian Cruise Lines with
I want to hear
cruise
about
ships.
this.
And so when I was out here doing Second City, all I wanted to do was ironically get back to Chicago and do a Second City main stage, because at this point I had studied enough and just wanted to be at the top of the craft at that time. And so I was auditioning. I was living in LA. And I flew to Chicago and auditioned for the Torco, Second City Torco, which is just the wildest, silliest idea. It would be like if you were living in Austin and flew out to UCB just for Herald auditions.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be like, yeah, David, you're really great. Now move. We liked you so much. You're going to move here and give up your life. And like, they weren't going to.
401 was worth it.
Like Second City wasn't going to hire me out of LA to join Torco, but I didn't know that then. So flew out there and auditioned for them. Second City out of Vegas at that time. I like auditioned for Second City Vegas and got hired to be an understudy, but that wasn't a great gig because it paid $50 a show. But I would get like the concept would be like, hey, we might call you on a Friday morning because we need you Friday night for a show.
Right.
And you'd need to be in Vegas by Friday night to make $50. Just the math wasn't mathing on that. But off of those two auditions, I think I had a strong enough presence in the back of their mind that I was offered a contract on a cruise ship. So they would have a cast of 6 people that they would hire, 5 cast members and a music director that would come on cruise ships and work for like 3 or 4 month contracts. And you would live on the boat and you would perform on the boat and you would have downtime on the boat. And that was the best job I've ever had.
How long were you? So I remember when the opportunity came around, I asked you, I was like, hey, did you hear about this new word? He's like, yeah, I did that. And I was like, mind blown. So how long did that last?
I toured a total of about 8.5 months.
So like 2 tours?
2 tours back to back. I was just absolutely blessed. My contract was out of Dover, England, and we did the Baltic Sea. I was on a cruise ship and we were doing shows on the boat, but the ports that we went to were like St. Petersburg, Russia, Estonia, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Finland. Like we went all over Eastern Europe and several times. So like, it was like, I've been to Stockholm, Sweden 5 times, but never in the night. Right. I'd get off and see as much as I could in 3 or 4 days. But if our longest cruise was maybe like 14 days, so that's 2 weeks. And out of that 2 weeks, I would work a total of 5 hours, which is shows, which is like not work. It's what you want to do. And maybe teach a workshop in the lobby for people who wanted to like do some improv. So it was the best job ever because I just lived on a cruise ship and worked out and ate like a fool and, dated a ballerina. It was great. Yeah.
What were those shows like?
They were incredible. I mean, it was Second City. So it was sketch, we were doing sketch comedy. It was a sketch show, but these sketches were written by the vast alumni of the Second City. Right. So like one of the,
doing like the greatest hits.
You're doing the greatest hits. Like the show closer is a sketch called Pictionary that was written by Carell and maybe Colbert, that cast anyways. So like you're doing sketches that were originally done by Second City people, which was cool. And then there was like short form bits within that show. So there was moments of improv in the sketch show. And then we would also do we would do 2 45-minute like bar shows that were strictly improv and that were very much short form because long form didn't quite translate. But we would end those sets with something called the dream or the day in the life, where we'd interview a passenger about their day.
Yeah.
And then we would like improvise what that day looked like. And that was always fun because it was the closest we'd get to like long form on the boats.
So what was it like? So it sounds like a really fun, magical time, but also a big high. What was it like leaving the tour ship?
Yeah, yeah, because you're doing shows for like 1,500 people, right? Like in a theater,
and you're traveling, and you must feel like, wow, like
yeah. And then you're coming back here, and you're like,
the time zone's all weird.
Time zone's weird. You're trying to get a commercial agent, and you're back to doing shows in black box theaters for maybe like the other improv team. But what it did is it just like accelerated my confidence. So I came back here and like ripped through IO West because that was the next closest thing, and that's what Mastriani was doing. And then I was really hesitant to go to UCB actually, because the first show I saw at UCB was the drug cage match, and it was just so unhinged that was like kind of my first experience with it, that I was like, oh, this place is like, they're not doing proper theater. Like they're spitting beer in people's faces and they're on Molly and doing crazy shit. And I was just like, that's what's indicative of this theater. That was like what I associated with it. And that was around the time, like, I think Paul Russ took a shit on stage too, which like half the community was like, that was a genius. And then the other half is like, that's awful and it ruins theater. So I had like both of that. That was like a tug of war happening in my brain.
Yeah.
But the truth was like audiences were at UCB. It was a guaranteed house. And I still think it is the hottest stage in town. Like Harold Night is a hot night to like do a show in front of people that are there to see comedy and that know it and that are there to laugh at it. So when I finally like dove in and started doing classes there, and this gets to like, if you want to speak to the hardship, it was like kind of taking years of a training that I had.
Yeah.
And now like applying it to game, to a different language and a different maybe structure to it. And I think like anybody, I had a little bit of trouble making that adjustment.
Yeah.
But the way around that were Susie Barrett and Jim Woods, Eugene Cordero, and Drew DeFonso Marks, the people who did Improv Boot Camp,
right?
Which is kind of like the that was before Weegis kind of existed. Weegis is in that space now, but for years there was this thing called Boot Camp, which was run Monday through Friday, so every day, 12 to 2, noon to 2. And you would pay for a month's worth of classes and you could attend all 17 or however many there were. And that got me good fast too. And that's where I met all of my like generation of performers.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up, just because, the landscape now is so different than it was a couple like years ago. And I want to talk about like this idea of like, doing Second City and then doing iOS and then doing UCB, and kind of to what we were saying earlier, like it takes a lot of, hey, this guy was doing Norwegian cruise ships, but now he's back at 101 because every school makes you start over. And there is like a mental like disparity where it's like, oh, I've killed in front of 1,500, Swedish people. And now at 101, you're telling me that like my moves might be like off game or whatever,
Well, it's tricky because like my moves were probably a little off game in 101, but I was the best person in 101.
Yeah, right. Because 101 is so much just like get out there and do it.
Yeah, but I was one of the stronger people in 201. So like I wasn't, maybe the hard part was I wasn't getting a whole lot of deep notes because we were like teachers' attention was focused on the people that were like treading water, and I could at least like swim, and maintain myself in a scene. I think what it maybe was a little more was while I was doing Second City and IO and working on boats, the people that moved out here the same time as I did, who started at UCB, were leveling up there. And it like UCB, I'm really happy the way that the path I took. I'm glad I started at short form, because like the funny thing was, even now, like you can get in line for UCB and you'll hear people knock other schools, or you'll get in line for another show and you'll hear people knock, in line, like, oh, I don't do UCB or I don't do IO. Like all these people are like, I don't understand that school. And for me, I was like, I want to learn from all of these and just be a like fully functional performer who can pick a little bit from each. But what Susie and Jim and those people did, they had come from Boom. So they had come from short form themselves, and they had all the confidence in like making quick choices, and, like playing big characters and object work, all these things that like you have to do in short form to pop. and now you like have that skill set to do game.
Yeah.
So like they kind of were just the best people to watch because they could do every technique. They had versus like only UCB people who I feel like kind of just gravitated downstage and like did bits at each other, like because they weren't maybe getting that like background that Second City did. Like Second City did a whole class on genre. Like 201 was all genre, so like you learned how to do genre there. But I don't ever remember doing a UCB class about genre or object work or all those.
Yeah,
because it was just like game and pattern and focusing on that.
Yeah, that's something that as someone who like has also done like a lot of different workshops with people from different backgrounds, it's been really tough for me because I know it's like this is an exercise. I can tell, as like as a good student, I can tell it's like, oh, this is an exercise that's probably part of like a whole course on like relationships, but now we're only getting like, you know what I mean? Like we're doing one exercise. So I understand the concepts, but like it's not enough time, it's not enough reps to get around it.
Yeah.
And I agree, like a lot of times now, there is not much of a focus. I don't even know if it would sell well, right? If you're like, hey, we're gonna do a 4-week 4-week course just on genre or just on XYZ, and people might be like, oh yeah, I don't want to take that.
I don't know. That's an interesting point. Like I host a drop in now on Sundays from 10 to noon at the clubhouse. And like last week I did a 2-week thing on genre, and it was great because the feedback I was getting from students, like, we're never exposed to this.
Yes.
And
I think there's a hunger for it now.
Yeah. You show them a couple things and then you show them the applicability of it too, and I think that's really important for, as you mentioned earlier, like people learn different ways. But if you like kind of stand in a circle and you're like, well, what is a zombie movie? And you're like literally standing in a circle pitching it because there's people in a room who've never seen a zombie movie, like
they're scary.
yeah, they're scary. But they don't have any input beyond that.
Yeah.
Like last night I was coaching a team that somebody initiated a Star Wars scene. The person across from them had never seen, like was just like, I don't know what. Why are you doing that? And everybody else like, that's Darth Vader.
No, this guy's got bronchitis. I can tell.
Yeah. They yes anded it by going. They're just like Vadering off of each other.
Two darts,
which is like great. Now we have that seed. But to get back to it, we would just stand and talk about the tropes of a genre.
Yeah.
Just to like open up people's brains to that, so that way, if you're doing a first beat where like like you don't want to buy Girl Scout cookies because they keep coming to your door and they're bothering you. Like second beat, like if you put if you map over a zombie apocalypse movie with Girl Scouts, that's a really fun scene that people can get. The audience can easily get and understand that. I
definitely want to dive more into this, but I think we're going to save that for the, for the next segment. But jumping back into your journey now. So how long did it take you to kind of, so like you mentioned that you're kind of excelling through the classes, not excelling, but like you were like, oh, he's a strong performer, we can push him up. At what point were you like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, or I can't ride on just being confident anymore?
Oh, well, no, I don't think it was just confidence. I mean, I got lots of reps, and I was fortunate to do that, and I like sacrifice, like I don't have like my job. If I go apply for a job, I don't have a resume. I've been teaching improv in people's living rooms for 10 years, know? But I was getting reps and reps and reps. I was doing every drop and I could do, not just doing UCB and doing stuff ahead of time. I was on Herald teams at IO for a long time. So I was getting Herald reps. I was part of a cage match team that won like 40 weeks in a row. And then we became a house team on top of that. So I was like, I had 2 weeks of show at IO. I was doing stuff at the West Side Comedy Theater and touring with them for several years. So I was fortunate also to, I've been able to, I've seen all of the US except for 4 states because I toured with Mission Improbable doing short forms in colleges, that's another, like doing short form sets for 900 college students is really fun. It's a nice packed house. So all of that was strengthening the improv stuff. I guess the real pickle was what everybody's bumps into here is like auditioning for UCB Herald teams. Right. And so when I first started doing that, I was really shooting myself in the foot because I think like what my stumble was trying to perform for what I thought they wanted instead of giving them who I was. Right. So like, I remember specifically speaking to genre, my second year auditioning for Herald Night, I saw Alex Fernie and Alex Berg in the room. And I was like, those guys are so smart. I'm going to make my second beat a historical time period. to like decide in the car on your way to an audition what you're going to do.
Right.
You're going to do a second beat in history, and then like being on the back line, like forcing that on your scene partner, like just, yep, we're like now in Columbus age.
Yeah. What do I know about the 1400s?
Exactly. And I didn't go that far in the car. So
Yeah.
like I just initiated a Columbus scene, and I was like, I have no specifics to carry this scene.
Right.
I'm forcing this in here. And that's what I was doing, is I was like playing for the auditors, playing for the room, instead of doing just good improv. And so the year that I got on, that was all I was focused on, is just like listen, label, be present, do all the things that you're doing, that you know you can do to get over the audition hump and the fear of that.
So like, just instead of like forgetting that, like, oh, I'm in a room full of judges, it's like, no, I'm in a cruise ship and I'm just gonna do my thing.
Yeah, I think so. Or even like like nobody's here except for me and this person.
Yeah.
And I am, and this was when the UCB audition was a little different. The first round was basically an organic audition. You didn't do an opening, you didn't do a pattern or a living room or a monologue. Like you just got a word and basically went. And I just remember like my strategy at that time was like, I'm going to have an opinion like about the word or about whatever my scene partner says. Yeah. And I'm going to listen to what they give me. And like, I'm just going to use all the things that I've used. It's a little like Jake Jabor's kind of thing of, you know, like reps on reps on reps until like, it's just
second nature.
Yeah. It's just second nature. It's driving a car. You know, when I get in my car, I don't think about all the things I'm doing. I just drive from my place to here while obeying all the traffic laws. But I'm in the flow of it. Right. So around that time when I finally did get on a Herald team, I just was in the flow, which was really cool.
And then around what point, because this sounds, we haven't even been tracking chronology, but this might have maybe like been like 4 or 5 years
I got on a Herald team in 2013. Okay. So I had been out here like 6 years at that point, maybe.
At what point did you start coaching? Or teaching?
I started coaching a little bit before I got on a UCB Herald team, but at that point I had been on an IO Herald team for like 2 years, and had done boats and other things that kind of gave me enough power to have people start asking me to coach. Oh, and I was teaching at Second City. My second year, even before I was doing cruise ships, I was teaching their youth classes, and that's because I came from a background in teaching kids, and they needed a kids teacher. So I was teaching improv before I had finished a program. Yeah. But to kids.
And that's something that I wanted to ask, like that jump, you know, from, you know, like, I guess having the confidence to be like, I know this enough to be able to impart it with other people. Yeah. How much do you think of your Teach for America experience came into that? How much of it, like doing cruise ships like that?
A huge amount, because Teach for America is like, it's addressing a teaching gap, a knowledge gap, a learning gap that exists in like low income rural communities. And so they are training teachers to be able to work with people who learn different ways. So I was exposed very early before I was doing improv to like how you can teach to different levels of people, how people learn. I use a lot of visual aids when I'm teaching, you know, and make charts and things like that, because that's how I like to learn myself.
That was one of my favorite things about working with you, is you gave us handouts, and you also had like, like a slide, but it's a piece of paper that you would draw out for us. And it is wild to me how, you know, K through 12, all of our life is looking at a transparency, looking at a projector, looking at a whiteboard. Right. And then when we jump out here, you're the first person that ever wrote anything down. I was like, this has been missing from.
Yeah, it's nice because you can snap a picture of it. Like we all have smartphones now, so you don't have to like take notes yourself. You can and you can use it or not. Like I don't do it being like, oh, I hope they put that on their fridge. You know, it's but it's something that I want to give to people because I know they learn different ways.
Of course, yeah. And although it may not be like work for everybody, like if it works for like 1 out of 8, like it's worth doing, I think. So I just think that's like very commendable, and I think that's something that like speaks to like how much you're thinking about the craft of teaching that, you know, students may need, and it kind of meets them where they're at.
Yeah, I think like that's one of my superpowers is teaching and that kind of thing, because I've done it most of my life. You know, going back to camp counseling and that sort of thing. It was working with people and helping them understand concepts and leading people.
I thought you were going to say that's one of my superpowers. I have access to a printer.
Yeah, I have access to a printer, dude. Yeah, you got to get one, man.
It's not the printer, it's the ink. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it is. That's where they get you. That's where the big ink gets you.
Great. Any closing thoughts about like your improv journey? I know that's very early on. You have like a whole decade to talk about, but like
Yeah.
anything else to talk about, like, or any some advice you want to
I
give
think
to people
just like
starting off?
if you're learning this and you're passionate about it, like study everywhere and don't say no to anywhere and don't be snobbish about anywhere. Cause like you'll probably pick up something from any class or workshop you do that will help you. Or you'll pick up something that you absolutely don't want to do, like
Right.
you'll learn from a teacher this and you'll be like, that is not for me. Um, and I think too is like don't put all your eggs in like making a house team at a specific theater. Like if you're listening to this and you're in LA right now, like this is a blossoming community of workshops and classes.
Yeah.
It's totally different. The landscape is really exciting because there's only a handful of theaters that have like a strong foothold on it, and then there's all these ones that are bubbling up that have taken from the schools before them all the good stuff from the schools before them and are like making them pop and making them more interesting, right? And all the institutions now are owned by like multi-conglomerates. So I feel like they're something different themselves. Like they're
Yeah.
not punk rock anymore,
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, no one's shitting on any stages.
Yeah. Like
That's a bad example. No one's spitting beer in anybody's faces.
yeah, and you don't necessarily want to do, but maybe
No
the
one should be
clowns are
shitting
though,
on
right?
stages.
I think like clowning
Sure.
might be doing that. That's
Yeah.
the new punk
Mhm.
rock. That's the new thing. And so I'm not going to be an old man yelling at clouds, being like, "Oh, it's changed. It's not, two-person scenes anymore." It's going to change, and it should change.
And yeah, part of improv, I think, is embracing that change.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mike, for walking us through.
Thank you for segment one.
Hey, I'm a structured guy. We're gonna jump into second beats now.
Let's do it.
So that's the end of segment one. We're now going to be jumping into segment two, which is our topic of the week.
Topic of the week.
Did I say week?
I think you did.
You know what? I think it is topic of the week. I think I need to change it because it's not weekly. So
your podcast is not weekly?
No. I think it's topic of the episode now.
Okay, great.
The new music thing is coming.
Topic of the episode. Great.
So you had presented two really good options, and although I really wanted to talk about coaching and teaching because I think that's something that you do really well. One thing from working with you that you really blew my mind and kind of opened my mind about was group scenes, group games. That's why I really wanted to have you talk about that. And yeah, I think we can even like lace in some of your teaching and coaching experience into that.
Yeah.
But one thing I really liked about your approach to this is something that, it was different from the way I had was taught before. I think most students deal with this when we learn group games. We learn like the mechanics of it. We learn all at once, verbal, nonverbal, all at once, or one at a time. And to me, when I hear that, again, I'm much more of like a structured person. I think, oh, there's only 4 types of group games, which is wrong and a really narrow way of putting it. Mechanically, yes, there's like literally only 4 ways you can start a scene, but from there you can go to different things. And you really challenged our team Bread Crew to try different things and also gave us a different outlook and perspective on it. So I want to hear like how you came to this like approach, maybe some of the different schools that you may have learned from, and kind of summarize your philosophy on group scenes.
Yeah. So just to clarify some language here, is like I think a group scene is any scene with like a group of people in it, and I think group game specifically applies to the Herald, to the Herald slot, although it could be in any form if you call it that. But and so what I maybe this is jumping ahead to like pet peeves or whatever, but I think like one thing that gets under my skin a little bit is when the group game slot in a Herald is just 2 long group scenes versus the potential of what you could plug in there. Because like years ago, and like people can like look this up on their own, like the Herald was much longer and had stuff like monologues in the middle of it and things like that. But that group game slot was not a scene. It was like maybe a poetry jam, or like it just served the Herald in a different way. And so it was probably a little bit of the second cityness and certainly the short forminess that like crept into my head when I was learning group games, which was like, it can be lots of things beyond a, hey, everybody get in here. And I would say it was more of like the UCB, maybe when I traveled over there, where it was like more of a, hey, everybody get in here. And you saw less like sound and movement-y, like weird group games. My favorite part of a Herald is the group game slot because I think it's a palate cleanser. It's an opportunity to change the dynamic of it. But also within those group game slots, because you can do something different in it, because you could do a commercial, like an improvised commercial, or you could do an improvised documentary in the middle of it, or again, like a poetry slam or something. Just in changing it, you're adding this new element to the Herald that can serve it on the back end. So like if you do a commercial for a product in the middle of this Herald, that commercial is now part of this world that at the end of the set, when you're making your connections and something, somebody could be like, oh, I have that razor blade from that commercial.
Yeah.
And it gets a huge callback laugh because it's something that was introduced in a way that's more interesting maybe than a group scene.
Yeah.
So when I first start coaching Herald teams, regardless of the theater, the first thing that we do before even openings is just like group games, group scenes. How are we going to approach group scenes, and how are we going to approach the group game slot?
So something I wanted to, you brought this up earlier, and it really like lit up a bunch of different light bulbs. You had mentioned earlier that when you're doing genre, you're doing like a zombie movie. Truth is, a lot of people haven't seen zombie movies, so how can they be expected to do a scene about it off the cuff? You're really teaching them what a zombie movie is before you can even teach them to improvise one. And I think when it comes to group games, the tough thing is, let's be honest, who's watching commercials?
Yeah.
So sure. A lot of times what we see a group game to be is what we've seen on stage. And a lot of them are going to be just scenes, longer scenes. So, in doing that practice with you, a lot of it was just like, oh, this man is just basically trying to, as a one person, as a coach, illustrating different examples, but it's hard to picture, it's hard to visualize one person doing an entire example of a group scene without having seen it,
Sure. I think I understood what you just said.
Yeah. Let me try to rephrase it. I guess, what would you recommend, or how would you push people to like challenge the idea of what a group game is if we have a very limited view? And just
okay, I see. Yeah, and that's exposure. A little bit. It is when I do that, and I'm like, all right, today we're going to work on the different types of group games you can have, and I do this at my drop into like interesting group games. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll just like run a bunch of improvised game shows, and yeah, it's interesting what you said about like people don't watch commercials anymore because like streaming and stuff has changed things. So maybe we don't like see commercials as much, but that's just an example, right? Like, you're kind of improvising to, or you're using the tools that are like part of the pop culture zeitgeist anyways, right? So maybe commercials is like not a great example, but like improvised Shark Tank is, because like everybody's seen Shark Tank, or when American Idol was in its prime, like people are familiar enough with that. And you don't have to, when you're improvising a zombie movie, you don't have to know all the beats of a zombie movie, but you need to just know like the little rules, right? Like they're slow moving. Usually they say brains, and if you get bit by one, you become one.
Right.
So then if you're mapping that over, it's like slow moving Girl Scouts. Instead of saying brains, maybe they're saying like cookies. And if they bite you, you become a Girl Scout, right? We're just like mapping over the cliches, the tropes of it, but enough for the audience to be like, I get what this is.
Yes. Cool. Yeah. A lot of things that I started doing musical improv recently, and a lot of the lessons that you taught me had really like started to come out in seeing that, because one of the big things about doing group games that you really harped on this was, and I think everybody should harp on this, is like repetition. No, we don't need to change anything. We just need to repeat it and maybe just add our own personal flavor to it. And the reason why I bring this up is like, when we do music improv, we have a chorus. Yeah. And all we're doing is we're singing that same song. We may add a little bit more flourish. We may change one word in that chorus, but for the most part, we're repeating the chorus exactly what it is. It's actually very disappointing if somebody sings the chorus and they change the words of the chorus. Yeah. Because then we're like, oh, I was trying to sing. The audience is like, I want to get in on it. And the same thing with the group game. Like, oh, I wanted to like beat you to the punch, but you completely sidelined like even like the mechanics. Sure. I'm thinking like an example is when we did like the hotspot monologues. Okay. Yes. So for that, for instance, someone initiates something like, hey, I'm a tape dispenser. I sit on a desk and I am really sticky. Then the next person steps on and then they're like, I'm a stapler, but there's a certain cadence or a certain pattern. So it's like, hey, I'm a stapler. I also sit on a desk. So it's kind of like who you are, where you're at, and what you do. Yes. People want to get used to that pattern. Yes. So even if it's not a scenic thing, it's just like, hey, I'm a remote. I sit between your couch cushions and I help you open the world. That type of repetition is what I mean.
Yes. So for like a logical person like you, like a structured person,
Yes.
I teach that in terms of constants and variables, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the constant in that is like, hey, I'm a tape dispenser. I let out tape. Promise I'm good at my job. Maybe use me more often. I'm a little lonely over here.
Right.
Next person comes out. Hey, I'm a stapler. I'm a little more confident than a tape dispenser. The constant is this like low energy sadness.
Yes.
That's the constant. The variable is like the item on the desk.
Right.
Right. And so the audience like learns the pattern, and the improvisers learn the pattern of like, oh, we're all depressed items on a desk, and there's your game. But if the first person's like, hey, I'm a tape dispenser, I'm sad, and like, hey, I'm a stapler, I'm really fun, like, then the game is just like each person is a different thing with a different energy, which is like cute, but like what's the pattern? What are we like? What are we? It's just they're both variables at this point. There's no constant for the team to kind of follow there, right?
I think like, again, like you're right. Like as a logical person, that makes sense to me, and I'm always constantly trying. Maybe I'm projecting onto the audience. Maybe they don't care, but for me as an audience member, because I am much more like logical, I need that. I need everything to be the same except for one variable change.
Yes.
But if I see 2 or 3 variables in the audience, I'm kind of like, I don't know what's happening. But as an improviser, I freeze because I'm like, I need to change,
Yeah.
I mean, I need to change 2 variables. I change 3 variables. And then I end up having like a paralysis of like,
because you're like, what is this? Right.
Versus if it's all the same, I'm like you talked about this, like you want to make your team like slam dunk. I know exactly what to do. You want them to feel confident, like, oh, easy. Just another office supply. That's the variable. Everything else stays the same. That makes it easy for myself.
Stays the same and heightens. Because like once you know like the pattern is depressed depressed office supplies. Once you know that, then it's on the back line, like as they're coming off, like to be like, okay, well, what's a fun thing to be depressed? Or what's a fun thing to heighten?
Right.
Like, oh, you think you fuckers got it bad? I'm a printer cartridge.
Yeah.
Like David won't even purchase me anymore.
Yeah.
So it's heightening that. And like to speak to the challenge of all of this, and the reason I start with group scenes and group games is, I think we spoke about this a little bit offline earlier, is when you have a brand new house team, it is typically 8 strangers of varying degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have pockets of familiarity where like these 3 people were friends and these 2 people knew each other from a class.
Yeah.
But it's all chemistry at that point. And is this chemistry going to work or not? And I think it's paramount to start with group scenes, and so that everybody is aware how other people play.
Yes.
And everybody's aware of like how to play unselfishly and to find that thing together, because group scenes and group games can be really hard when it almost becomes competitive to like getting a laugh. Right. So that first person is like, I'm a depressed tape dispenser, and that gets a laugh. And the next person like, well, they got a laugh. I got to get bigger than that.
Yeah.
And then third person's like, I got to get bigger than that. And then the people on the back line are like, well, I've got to be funnier than all these things. Like I've got to try to heighten this and get my own laughs versus like using what came before it.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you speak about this, because it's also really great, but it kind of just exemplifies what you're saying earlier. Different approaches, different philosophies. Because from what I'm hearing you say this now, you're almost saying that like the group game, the group scenes are like a microcosm, and it's exemplary of like how the rest of the set's going to go. Because if you can kind of fill each other out and work together in a group game, then the rest of the Herald should go pretty smoothly. Is that kind of how much
I think it could go pretty smoothly. I mean, I just think like those are the hardest parts of a Herald in some ways, because it's 8 to 9 brains.
Yeah.
Because Herald teams were 9 people, 8 to 9 brains trying to be funny in the same direction.
Right. So it's kind of like if you can like do this well, the rest of the stuff should be kind of downhill.
Yeah, I think so. Although like 2-person scenes are a different animal, and like the scene slots in a Herald are totally different from the group game slots. Because what I'm saying is like I would prefer to see
a good group game,
a different group game.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely good. I would prefer to see good improv to bad improv, but I would prefer to see a group game slot that is not a hey, everybody get in here group scene, because let's save those for our second beats and our third beats. Those can be everybody get in here, and you can still have your cake and eat that.
Yes.
While like trying stuff in the group game slot that's different.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I bring that up is just because I think every improviser is going to feel differently. Like I've had people come in and say, "Oh, the opening is that." Like if you nail the opening, the rest of the Herald should be easy. Or you got to drill your 2-person scenes. If you and another improviser can just really spell out exactly what the scene is, like that's the So at the end of the day, obviously it's all important. But I do appreciate you bringing this in, because very few people ever say it's the group game that's important.
And I think the group game can't be because it comes so far into the Herald that it's not like if you nail that, the rest of the Herald is fine because you've got to do stuff to get to there.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is to me, it has the coolest connective tissue to make that show different and surprising. Because all the other things are a little more traditional in the way that they're set up.
Yeah, like it's a palate cleanser and it should feel as such.
Yeah. Or just different, non-scenic. Like what can you do there that's non-scenic that kind of pops the audience out of it? So then when we're going back into scenes, those hit even harder because it's like, oh, these people again.
Yeah.
Versus like another long group scene, right?
Yeah. And just in case some people may not know what you mean by non-scenic, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Like it's so in the group game slot, you can do like you can do takeover monologues, right? Where people are coming downstage and doing a pillars of light where they are like downstage straight to the audience, addressing them, doing a series of monologues, and then people are coming up and doing monologues next to them. It can be what I've said of like a game show, which is scenic. All this stuff are scenes, right? But it's structured in a way that isn't like we're all playing characters in the same location.
Yeah.
Commercials, an improvised fashion show. It's like taking the premises, like listening to those premises and just listening to the ones that are like, that would be a really fun potential group game, you know, like, if somebody at the beginning talks about like, I spend so much time with my dog, I feel like I'm dating them. You can certainly do a scene where somebody's like, I think I'm dating my dog. Or you can take that premise and put it in like The Bachelor with a dog, like, and map over an episode of The Bachelor, but doing it with a dog. And that to me, it's not scenic in terms of like two people coming in and doing a scene in like a Target.
Yeah, I think it's a concept because when I hear you say it, it clicks for me because I've also done short form in the past. So I know the difference between like a long form scene and then a short form scene. Because I mean, obviously, even a short form game and even a group game should have a lot of the same elements. You know? People think like, oh, a scene, that means who, what, where, right? It's like, yes, but it's more so how it's laid out and what we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not it's almost like we're not progressing in time so much as we are like locked. It's like a snapshot. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But like when you do short form, like I think that's really clear. Like a lot of those short form games, like they're non-scenic because the end goal is to play the mechanism.
There are short form games that I've done that are like slow motion Olympics, right?
Yes.
Where it is like you're doing Olympic and what when through that short form game, what I'm learning and taking away from it is being able to confidently set up somebody sidelined at a sporting event to set up. If I wanted to do a group game where it was at the Olympics, I could like come and set that up and make it clear like we're in an Olympic program, or on the Home Shopping Network or any one of those things. That's just a little bit different.
Sorry, that just sprung another topic that I want to ask you about.
David.
Dude, this guy's inspiring. He's
man.
In terms of like setting up, I think this is something that I really try to like. I want to learn how to do this better, and I want to hear what your thoughts on. Because if you are trying to set up like a bachelor group game or a bachelor or a game show, the way it's funny you mentioned like everybody getting here, everybody knows like okay, we're all standing up. We're all waiting to be assigned a specific character, and then we know we're going to pitch. So there's almost like an anticipation. So how do you get a group of improvisers, or how would you initiate it? What's your thought process to be like, hey, we're not doing everybody get in here. In fact, I need you to, I'm going to start monologuing. I need you to come in after me to tag me out and take over my monologue.
Well, you practice it a whole lot as a team. Yeah. Like you set aside practices to work on that, right? When Outside Dog was a team, was a Herald team, Susie Barrett was our coach, and Susie one week had us hire a choreographer, and we just had somebody work on like teach us how to dance together. And I know that's very silly and like but it showed us how to move together and like how to safely lift each other up and how to like physically interact with each other in ways where we felt safe, so that when we were doing that on stage we knew how to do that. So it's like you're developing those skills through practice. But to specifically speak to your question of like, if we hadn't worked on setting up a bachelor scene, I would just be very like almost overly clear at the beginning, just to be like, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This season on The Bachelor, our bachelor is Corvette, a golden retriever, here to meet the owner of his dreams. Corvette, let's talk to you a little bit, and just like try to make it very clear to my team that this is what we're doing.
Yeah, it's like an over communication, you know?
Yeah. And if it gets gummed up, then we roll with that, that's okay too. But I just like taking those swings. And I was kind of notorious on Outside Dog, big eye roll emojis sometimes when I would set up a group game, because like, there's Mike doing a group game again. I guess we'll all follow. But I would say like oftentimes that turned into like great stuff because I had the support of a wonderful team that would follow me into the dark.
Yeah. I mean, likewise, I think that's something that you've influenced me a lot, because I love initiating with the whole group, but it is not just going to be like everybody getting here. Now it is just like, long, like you said, like big eye roll moment, because it's like, hey, welcome back to this game show where we're eating spaghetti, and we have 3 contestants, and we have contestant number 1, and you really give them everything, and it feels a little selfish, but at the same time it is also like, this is how it has to happen. There's no world where I can just say we're eating spaghetti now, and then everybody instinctively knows, like, okay, great.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing a game show. Yeah. You got to kind of like telegraph what you want, and you're doing that for the audience as well. Right. And then once you're on the other side of that, anything can happen, but it's trying to telegraph what it is that I guess it is what you want, but what you're not precious to. Because if you're setting that up and you're precious to it, then you're not being present in the moment. If you're like, welcome back to the game show where we eat plates of spaghetti. Let's meet our first contestant. What's your name? And they're like,
Mike, this is Thanksgiving dinner. I would appreciate it if you wouldn't do your little game show bit. Then it's like, great. That's the scene now.
Mom, but I just outed myself as I want to be a game show host. Like I listen to everybody else's problems. Like, let's do it. Yeah. I'll make it work. Yeah. But I think too, one of the most fun positions to be in a group game or group scene is the second person, like not the person who makes the first move, the person who makes the second move, which is supporting the first move and showcasing to the audience and everybody else, like, this is the pattern we're setting up. Right. And that speaks to just going back to group scenes, those, hey, everybody get in here scenes, where somebody is setting up like, hey, we're the, hey, PTA, like we're raising money to send our kids to Washington, D.C. How should we do a fundraiser? And if your first move, David, is like, we should sell our kids, right?
Sets the tone.
That sets the tone. And then if the second person goes like, we could start building Hummers in our front yard, like, everybody just resetting it. Like, here's my idea to raise money. No, here's mine. No, here's mine. And maybe they're getting bigger laughs, but all it's doing is delaying the opportunity for a pattern.
Right.
Whereas if your first move is like, we should sell our kids, and then the second move is like, that's a great idea. My wife and I are planning on having triplets anyways. We'd be happy to give to the cause.
Yeah.
Like, we're
2 to spare.
Yeah. 2 to spare. We're going to keep the best one. But we're happy to, part with one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe that's also part of this. This is something that I've also been focusing a lot. It's receiving, and I don't want to say like receiving, because I think typically when we have a 2-person scene, it's what it is. How you receive the initiation. But when you're doing a group scene or group game, I mean, it's still the second person. Even though it's like, hey, 7 people have the opportunity to step up to be the receiver, but it is how you receive it, and it's how you deal with it, right? I remember one of the exercises we did was also like, not just the second, I mean, it all cascades, right? Then the second's important, then the third person is important. So it's almost like a never-ending line of like receiving, because the first initiation happened, then it's how the second person receives it, but then it's how the third person receives that second person's lines, how the fourth person receives the
all
third
like
person line.
When I approach those things, to me, it's just like, I love your dumb idea. So it's not like, here's my dumb idea. It's like, I like yours, and I'm going to yes and that, and we're going to build, and that will hopefully become the group's collective dumb idea.
Yeah. All right. My one question for this, and this is something that, again, as a very like logical, structured person, I've always struggled with. At what point in the succession do you think somebody, just in case things may get a little bit rocky and shaky, at what point do you think someone should like step in and like label it or like say it out loud?
I don't know that it's at any specific point, but probably the earlier the better. The earlier that somebody can just be like, this is what I'm hearing from the group. And then hopefully that is also underlined by the next, hopefully the group is like, once it's labeled, the group is cementing it and being like, yes, that's what it is, instead of being like, no, that's not it. It's this,
And what do you, as someone who's like worked and taught a lot of different teams, why do you think that can be a struggle sometimes?
Because it's listening.
Yeah.
I think it's listening. It's being in your own head. It's this might be an unfair thing because it speaks more to like me as a younger improviser, and certainly a now improviser too, which is just like, I got to get some laughs here too, or like, I want to contribute to this. Like,
Right.
it's that energy of let me be a part of this, right?
Right.
Those group scenes that devolve, and this happens so much at Herald auditions, I feel like, is the group game slot devolves into 8 people yelling over each other. Their idea. It's everybody just almost like yelling, like, no, my idea. Instead of like, idea, great, know? And it always would stand out to me in auditions when like somebody would make the second move and it was clear that they were listening and they were like, let's follow this. Because it was that second move. Once you hear it twice and then a third time, it's almost like everybody relaxes because they found it. Instead of like having this like inventing it instead of discovering it. Right.
One last question. If you want to talk more too, that's great. But I had one last question about this because for me, sometimes I don't know if I'm too good at yesing or I'm not good enough at anding. A lot of times, whatever let's just say the DC example again, like let's get fundraise. A lot of times I struggle with be like, let me think of something unusual like let's sell our kids. Sometimes I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. We should fundraise. Maybe we could sell M&Ms, And then sometimes it becomes a little bit too grounded where it's like, and then the second person's like, yeah, or we could also sell beef jerky. It takes a while before somebody's like, let's sell our kids.
Yeah. If the first move was like, we should sell M&Ms, I would immediately try to, if I'm next to you in that, right, I would like try to set up what's funny to me about that, or like move that in the direction. Yeah. And we'll sell them individually. Cause like if we sell them one by one, like, I don't know, trying to create a world where like selling M&Ms is funny. It's the strategy and here's how they're going to do it. That's twisted or backwards, but not being like, if you go like, yeah, we should sell M&Ms. And I go like, no, beef jerky. It's just like, it's constantly searching for the thing.
Yeah.
Instead of like, yes, we'll sell M&Ms and we'll sell them one by one. Right?
I think that's something that like is maybe like people get caught up on. I know for sure I do, which is that it's just like that second, like that choice of like M&Ms. Yeah. Like you said earlier, it kind of resets. It's like, well, no, not M&Ms. We'll sell W&Ws.
Yeah, and let me say this: like, speaking to this, like, if the first move, like, it's setting it like that's not a great scene setup, anyways, right? It's like, hey, everybody, get in here, solve this problem, right? Your move of like, we should sell M&Ms to me is not a bad or wrong move. It is yes and again. Yeah, we should, and we should sell M&Ms. That's not funny, but what I like is you're not forcing it to be funny. Somebody being like, we should sell our kids is too heightened, I think, right away. It's funny, but then it's like, we're selling our kids. Who are these monsters? What's their deal? Selling M&Ms is funny to me. It's again the second move, trying not to be like, how about we sell beef jerky instead? Or like, no, let's sell our kids. It's like, all right, now let's yes and selling M&Ms. Yeah, we should sell M&Ms. They need some new color. We should paint them ahead of time.
Right.
Like, like that would maybe get a laugh. Paint M&Ms. Now that sounds toxic. Like, oh, we'll find non-toxic paint. There's nail polish. Like I who knows? But we like just say yes to selling M&Ms. And then discover as an ensemble what's funny or fucked up about that.
Yeah.
And heighten it. And then it's somebody's job to probably be a voice of reason, to start poking holes in that.
Yeah.
So that we can make discoveries there as well.
I think that really goes back to what you were saying before about like warming up and then like getting on the same page and just finding, what's funny about each other's sense of humor, right? So if oh yeah, David, he's just gonna say the most practical answer, which is M&Ms, then that like, let's make that a brilliant idea rather than a grounded idea.
That's it.
Let's like, how do we make M&Ms like a brilliant decision? It's like, yeah, because M&Ms come in 5 different colors. We can, sell blue ones for a higher price than yellow ones or whatever. Whatever it ends up being,
Yeah, it's
that also sounds really practical.
But I would say I liked we should sell M&Ms way more than we should sell our kids. And again, just to highlight that, I liked it because it is an offer that like we can build on versus a like, here's this real big thing. Here's my big dumb idea. Everybody follow this. And like, it's so heightened right away versus the thrill of the ensemble discovering what's funny about selling M&Ms. Right. So I don't think that first move has to be funny by any means. I think it's like, it's the group listening to it and discovering what's funny about it.
Yeah. Right? And yeah, to your point, now that I hear you say it, if I saw a team slowly build out fundraiser to M&M to individually paint, selling them or whatever, like that to me is so much more joyous than like, oh, this is the team with the wild card. And whenever the wild card says we're sell kids, like that ends up becoming, there's like no group ownership, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody gets to own the M&M thing, but the selling kids is like, oh, that's the Mikey McLendon special, right?
Yeah, sure. Like that. Okay, I guess we're selling kids. I'll yes and that. Yeah, versus the Eminem thing, it does. It feels like it becomes group ownership because it wasn't funny here. It was discovered by the group what was funny about it.
All right, great. Any other closing thoughts on group games or group scenes?
No, I would just say like if you're if especially if you're part of a Herald group right now and your group games aren't popping, like try to practice different things in that scenario because like I said, it was a pet peeve or it gets under my skin. It doesn't bother me that much, but I just like I see groups not take full advantage of that slot with what you can do with it, and even the thrill of like using just the original word in that slot and doing something organic or weird or different and what it could be or what, and like you might like, it might be a big swing that like goes down in flames, but it might also be the highlight of the Herald.
And I hope even outside of Herald, I hope people do more group games and group scenes. In montages. I mean, it works for every form except for maybe the mono scene. Maybe
and you could even do it there. You definitely could.
Everybody says the walk afterwards. I don't know.
But in a if a team does a living room opening and then they do a montage, there's no reason that you couldn't have a game show or a commercial or a Pillars of Light or just a weird scene there. It's also just like something to do in rehearsal or to practice with the coach. So that way, when somebody does do that, nobody's thrown or like, what did you want from me there?
Everybody get in here. One person walks on. We only practice 2-person scenes.
But I'd love like if somebody like initiates in the group game slot and they're like bzz, 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 and the next person is doing that, and the next person, I'm always thrilled by that. As long as an ensemble, they're like, well, what's this? What's funny about this? What are we discovering? About this? How are we heightening it up to a point where we're like all in agreement that like we're all moving the comedy in the same direction?
Totally.
All
right, awesome. Time to close the segment. Thank you so much again, Mike, for
you're welcome,
imparting your knowledge on a really I think a really crucial part of improv and sharing
the most fun part.
And the most fun part. And like
you don't have to have that opinion, but
I do have that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, like I didn't join this team so that I could just do one scene with.
You're talking about musical improv, right? And like
especially musical improv.
Musical improv blows my socks off anytime. And like I know the tricks of it now, but like seeing it early, watching like 6 people dancing the same way, or like singing a chorus the same way, like you walk out of that being like, how you guys wrote that ahead of time, right? Or like you knew that, like like doing dance triangles or whatever, where everybody's like choreography is matching. It like it's so cool to know that they're making that up. And that comes from like practicing as an ensemble, moving in the same direction and saying yes to each other's ideas and not trying to deliberately change it or make it more interesting or make it unique to you.
And you can only support it, right? If somebody is singing a certain line, all you can do is like add to their last line, like, I know what they're gonna rhyme, they're gonna say cat, and you just help them like support the cat. Like that always looks so great, so clean, but it's never just like actually my punchline's
I'm gonna subvert it. I'm not gonna rhyme, and the audience is gonna laugh at that. But it's like they probably would have liked it way more if you just paid that off.
All right, great. We're gonna go and jump into our last segment now, which is going to be our
hot improv takes.
I hope you can appreciate this. I actually came up with this segment based off of you making us do the hot take.
Hot takes.
I was like, this is such a quick way to like dive into a strong opinion, something that's like relatable, something that we can all like pull a premise from. But I just wanted to apply it for improv.
Great.
So credit goes to you.
Great. Expect residuals from each podcast.
Buddy. So am I.
Okay, great. When this is up on Patreon, let me know.
So the segment is just exactly that. You're gonna do a 1-minute hot take on an improv. It's not a minute, it could be less than or longer, but you're just gonna rant on an improv trend, like a hot take on an improv trend that you want to see more of or less of, or whatever.
Oh man, I had mine on the way over here, but
you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay.
Are you on the spot now?
A little bit, but I have one. I always have plenty of hot takes. I can go. If this guy taught me anything, is that you can get a word.
Yeah, I was even going to ask you, like, maybe give me a word and I'll just do a hot take off of. Give me an improv word or concept, and I'll just do a hot take off of that.
Okay, maybe this will inspire you.
Okay.
All right. Hot improv take. It's cool to show up on time or early to practice. We're all paying for it, and if I understand that traffic in LA is crazy. I understand that parking in LA can be crazy, but sometimes we don't get to start practice until like 15 minutes in, and that's money. Hey, the meter's running. The coach is like, hey, we're going to talk about what you did this week, or we're going to talk about what movie I saw on the weekend, and I'm paying you for that. I'm paying you for your improv knowledge. And this is something that can be mitigated, can be fixed if we all just show up on time or early, try to get there a little bit early. And then, oh boy, nothing makes you feel better than when it's 5:01 and all of a sudden the coach is like, oh yeah, we got to start warming up. Because that guy didn't get to eat into our practice time with any idle chit chat. That happened earlier. That's my hot improv take.
No, that's a good hot take. Like that would drive me crazy when I was paying for something and we were eating up clock with unnecessary stuff. And sometimes that stuff is necessary. And like I have groups where we'll talk for the first half hour because they're asking legitimate questions. Right. And the tone of the room is not people like, I'm like, I'm fucking gonna start, because like we're just solving one person's problem. But yeah, everybody, if you live in LA, you might have like 6 weeks to a couple months to figure out how traffic sucks, and you better be more accountable. Yeah. Don't be the asshole on the team that's always late.
But also, it's okay if you're late. Sorry,
it is okay. But if you're late and you're coming in with coffee, like,
hey.
My
That's
man, great. You probably, if you stopped and got that coffee, if you were 15 minutes late, chances are 5 to 10 of that was getting that coffee.
Yeah. But also, it also sounds like I don't like my coaches. I've been very.
No, I don't think this has to be coach related. It can be player related too.
Class related, yeah, all those things. But I've been very fortunate where the 10 to 15 minutes of small talk with my coaches, I've always really enjoyed, and I appreciate that, and it's worth every penny.
And if I'm late, I tag it on in the back end. Like I had to be a half hour late for a group last night, and I told them ahead of time. And then thankfully they didn't have a hard out, and like we did the full 2 hours or whatever. Like
it's a great policy.
I think we're all humans and we all like have that. But yeah, I certainly like value people's time. And I also like, while we're speaking to this, like hot take about coaches and teachers and all that, like I personally hot take, I don't want to be monologued at for a 3-hour class that I paid for. I've paid for classes at UCB that were 3 hours long, and I'd get up once. Like, because the teacher just waxed on, like, and I'm not paying for that. Like, sell me a lecture series, at least do that. Like, allow it to be a lecture series instead of a place where I can get up and get reps. Because notes should never be longer than the people are on their feet doing it.
Yeah. Is that going to be your hot take?
No, I don't think that'll be my hot take. Okay. I want to try where you give me an improv thing and I try to do one off the dome.
All right. Give me one. I'm going to try to figure out one that we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
Give me one about ending a set. And like editing or whatever third beat connections is ending.
Okay, great. Hot take to me is the most impressive way to end a set is with a callback. Mm-hmm. But forced callbacks and forced connections can be a really sad way to end earned momentum with, especially a herald. So let's put this under the lens of a herald, right? Yeah. Is like, we know that the goal of a herald is, as you're getting towards the end of it, worlds are starting to collide and things like that. But what I think happens is like, we're pushed up against the clock. And so we're trying to force connections at the end. And then it's just be like, hey, remember me? It's Uncle Stinky. Blackout. Which like, you've made the connection, but you might not have earned that laugh or what have happened there. This was pretty common years ago, and it might still be. I haven't been to Herald Night in a while. Personally, I think one of the coolest things you can do is spin out of the second group game into your third beats and do kind of a fluid transition. I've seen groups do that. But I think like the way to end a show is with a great callback. And that's really challenging because it's somebody else pulling lights, unless you're calling your own show, that can be a way to do it. But I love like a good callback at the end of a show. And the other night I was judging the showdown, the summer showdown, which is like a cage match. And one of the teams, like the very first scene that they started with, they got away from it. They were doing a slacker, and the button of that show was connected to that first scene. And it was right when the lights went off in the booth. And it was like it just earned a huge amount of applause because it was like that connective tissue, that callback laugh. Yeah. And it was very satisfying. But you can't always like get that. So when you watch a team and they're just like, here's the button, and then the lights don't go out, and they're like, no, here's the button, it can be really jarring because you're playing for buttons versus just like playing out the end of the show.
That's a really great hot take. And I think it's one of those things that like, it's like a hot stove. You have to touch it. You have to learn the hard way of why you can't force like the callback. Because I think we all do that because we all know how satisfying a callback is. We've seen great sets end that way. So I think for me, at least, I'm like, I want to I want to match that like level of like goodness. So I will force a call back. But that, yeah, I think the best way is to be like Zen about it. Like, you know what? I have this callback, and if the scene presents an opportunity, I will. But like, it's the discipline to say, but I'm not going to come out unless it's organic, unless it suits the situation.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes time.
Yeah.
But that's a great hot take.
Cool. I did it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Mike, for stopping by and talking to us about your improv journey and
Thank you, buddy.
Group games. Any plugs you want to drop before we?
Yeah, you can follow me on socials at Mike McLendon Improv. That's my my coaching and teaching and performer page, where you can find out about shows I'm doing or classes, workshops that I'm doing. I do teach a drop-in for the World's Greatest Improv School for Ouija's. That's every Sunday, 10 to noon at the Clubhouse. And then I do an occasional show. It's called HowIMetYourSitcom.com, and we do entirely improvised sitcoms. Yeah.
Is that .com new?
HowIMetYourSitcom.com. No, it's always been around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a website element to that?
Yeah, it's a website, HowIMetYourSitcom.com.
Oh,
it's not on Instagram. Yeah. It's HowIMetYourSitcom.com is where you can find show information.
I thought that was the name of your show. I was like, I don't remember there being a website.
Yeah, no. The show is How I Met Your Sitcom, but you can follow that website for show info. Right now, we do a show called Happy Hour at Logan's.
Yeah.
It's an entirely improvised like episode of Cheers. We have a bar on stage. It's a long extended mono scene with a commercial break. It's a blast.
Got it. Yeah. I've seen that show. I love that show. Sorry for misunderstanding. This is why I need you to have a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sitcom.com is a confusing thing to say in general. Yeah.
Got it. All right, we're great. Well, thanks again, everybody. Bye, all. Great episode. I should have said good episode at the end.
You said bye, everybody. Great episode. Bye, everybody. This was a good episode.
That's in case you didn't know, that was a great episode.
Our fifth segment. Great episode.
Yeah.